Hi, I'm Senator Dr. Roger Marshall from the great state of Kansas, and I'm here today to walk you through the timeline of the origins of COVID-19. Before we dive into the story of the origins of COVID, questions I'm often asked are, why is this important? Why do we care about the COVID origins? There are many reasons why we need to get to the bottom of this virus origin. As a physician, I think we always need to know what, where, how, and perhaps why whenever any infectious disease outbreak occurs. Whether hundreds die from Ebola, thousands from HIV, or millions from COVID, we need to know the answers to the questions to prevent or minimize future infections, to develop future vaccines as well as antidotes. And if it was leaked from a lab, what can we do to prevent future leaks? And if it was made in a lab, certainly that would influence the height and thickness of those guardrails to do our best to make sure nothing like this ever happens again. And finally, this reason: for emotional closure for the millions of people who lost loved ones, for our own mental health, and for all of us who have suffered in so many ways. Now here's the big picture. 4 months prior to COVID landing in the United States, there's strong evidence to prove that China knew about the lab leak that began its cover-up. That's 4 months prior. In January 2020, I was the first member of Congress to stand on the House floor to discuss my concerns about COVID-19. I'd later serve on the front lines as a volunteer treating Kansas patients in the ICU and ER, as well as in outpatient clinics. I even helped set up mass community COVID testing sites in rural Kansas communities hit hard by the pandemic's early stages. I've been following this pandemic on a daily basis since early January 2020. For 19 months, it's the first issue I think of in the morning and the last one I ponder before going to bed. Today, with over 4 million lives lost, cases spiking from the Delta variant, and counties and states around the country reinstating mask mandates, critical questions remain unanswered. Unfortunately, thus far, minimal records or U.S. intelligence have been made available. Many records and samples have been destroyed, gag orders placed, social media censored, all the while the trail of truth is getting colder every day. Now, what we do know is that the story of the origin of COVID actually starts back in 2014, when the Obama administration placed a moratorium on gain-of-function research. Why? This was a nuclear bomb waiting to happen. Before we go any further, let's take a moment and explain what viral gain-of-function really means. So gain-of-function means when you purposely give more functions to a virus. The virus gains functions. The virus gains more abilities, like the power to more easily spread to other species and gain more strength. Viral gain of function occurs when a scientist in a laboratory take a virus that occurs in nature and manipulate its genetic makeup to make it more easily transmissible and or more virulent. In other words, they take a common virus and make it easier to spread, and or they make it meaner, angrier, and more lethal. Now let's take a closer look at our timeline. As I was saying, the Obama administration was so concerned about viral gain of function that they stopped it in 2014. However, it's important to note that the ban did allow loopholes for Dr. Fauci and NIH Director Dr. Collins to carry out and fund gain of function research if they deemed so. Sure enough, the NIH continued to fund what many would consider viral gain of function research. In fact, in 2015 and 16, using these publicly funded NIH dollars, a University of North Carolina virologist worked with the Wuhan Institute of Virology and Dr. Shi to humanize the SARS virus. Now let me show you what this means for this virus that we've all come to know. Originally, the SARS virus broke out in 2002. Several hundred people died from it, but the reason it did not spread more rapidly was because it did not attach very well to human cells. What the University of North Carolina and Dr. Shi did was develop a protein spike. That's what this is here. This protein spike became the key to the door, if you will. The key that would allow the SARS virus to unlock a human lung cell and stick like glue to the human lung cell, thus increasing transmissibility. This is the classic application of the definition of gain-of-function research. They took the SARS virus and made it more transmissible. Now hold on to that thought for a bit, because this protein spike they developed will show up later in the story. Let's fast forward to 2017. The White House executive branch's scientific leaders decided to go back and describe guardrails to kickstart more dangerous gain-of-function research. This guidance became known as P3CO. And in December of 2017, the NIH turned on the faucet and viral gain-of-function went full speed ahead. With these new rules in place, the NIH started funding Dr. Shi and the Wuhan Institute of Virology using a non-governmental organization intermediary, EcoHealth Alliance. Of note, the NIH and Department of Defense funded EcoHealth Alliance to the tune of more than $33 million from 2017 to 2020. So let's keep going. The US-funded research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology continues through 2018 and 2019, when all of a sudden some strange coincidences start happening. In September of 2019, the Wuhan Institute of Virology takes its entire genomic data bank offline. So the DNA sequences of these viruses, the viruses that have been stored but now deleted in this computer bank, could well have shown the map or the road from where COVID came from. Similar to how if you could trace your DNA from your mom and her ancestors, it could have been used to predict future variants and develop vaccines. These DNA sequences were the possible witnesses to the development of COVID. Significantly, this is the first of several witnesses to disappear. As you listen to this story, think of it like the Attorney General arresting the Godfather, and suddenly all the witnesses start disappearing. If the witnesses disappear, does that make it more or less likely the Godfather is guilty? Now, let's move forward to October of 2019, when the city of Wuhan hosted the Military World Games and thousands of soldiers from hundreds of countries gathered. Strangely, the military athletes found the city of Wuhan to be a deserted ghost town. Picture this, a city of over 11 million people was like a ghost town. Furthermore, several weeks after the games, many of the athletes had a mysterious viral syndrome very similar to the symptoms of what we know to be COVID-19. Could this have been the first major super spreader event? Now let's go to November of 2019, when intelligence has now confirmed that many Wuhan lab workers were sick. And interestingly, in December of 2019, the China CDC, which has a significant Communist Party military presence, moves to Wuhan as well, and most likely took over the cover-up. And finally, for December of 2019, retrospectively, we now know blood samples collected in numerous US states by the American Red Cross carried COVID antibodies. We now know the virus was in America at least a month before the first documented case. Okay, let's take a breath and talk about 2020. I'm sure you all recall in early January, the World Health Organization and Chinese Communist Party were denying any person-to-person transmission, instead pushing a big lie that COVID came from a meat market. In fact, it wasn't until January 19th, 2020 that China and its puppet, the World Health Organization, confessed there is indeed person-to-person spread. So feasibly, the Chinese Communist Party sat on the true nature of the most lethal virus known to mankind for over some 4 months, seemingly working with the World Health Organization nearly every step of the way to cover it up. Indeed, we know the Chinese Communist Party was already developing and administering a vaccine by February 2020. And also in February of 2020, the Wuhan Institute of Virology lab destroyed at least 8 very COVID-similar viruses they had in keeping. Why? Only a cover-up makes sense. Not only might these viruses have helped provide a map to understanding COVID-19, they might have helped us predict how it might mutate and impact the development of more effective current vaccines as well as future vaccines. As a scientist, this feels like a crime against humanity. And finally, keep in mind that it wasn't until March of 2020 that the World Health Organization declared COVID as a global pandemic. One last point. Remember the story from 2015 and 2016 when a University of North Carolina lab was working with Dr. Shi to make a protein spike? Well, it turns out the COVID spike is composed of two units. One unit being the same as the spike we mentioned earlier developed by the University of North Carolina and Dr. Shi. The other unit, well, that's what Nobel laureate Dr. Richard Baltimore called the smoking gun that shows this virus came from a lab, not from nature. This other unit of the protein spike contains the furin cleavage site, the site that only a human lung cell can cleave to activate the virus. The cleavage site with its double CGG arginine codon allows a virus to dump its genetic machinery into the human lung cells. So now, the rest is, as they say, history. History, the hell that we've all lived over the past year and a half. Loss of loved ones, school closures, mask mandates, lockdowns, economic ruins, lives disrupted, mental health on decline, and more. You all know the rest of the story. Except to say one more of the major witnesses have been eliminated by the Godfather. Finally, in March of 2020, at the Wuhan Institute of Virology's request, our own NIH destroyed all the related viral genomes stored by the NIH. As you can see, the story of the origins of COVID is long and complex. Unfortunately, only complete access to all the data and samples these witnesses, if they still exist, will determine the truth. That's why I'm working across the aisle and around the world to encourage world leaders to demand full access to all relative records, samples, and key personnel. If bad actors continue to obfuscate and prevent this investigation from happening, we can't take no for an answer. The American people, the entire world, deserve to know the truth.